I see what ho, chaps and chappets, Game Chap and Birdie here.
Yes.
Yes, indeed, fellows, and I dare say we are now discussing an interesting rumour, or shall we say allegation of sorts, raised against Mr. Sakurai concerning a bit of bias, and it seems he has responded to that allegation, has he not, old chap?
Well, most certainly yes indeed. As we all know, there's hot feelings around the characters and their gameplay within Super Smash Bros. Tier lists and all the rest of it, how
Yes.
they perform, etc. so forth.
Very controversial.
Indeed. But it was suggested that Mr. Sakurai had actually, well, should we say, tweaked the characters he liked to make them better, more powerful.
That's quite interesting, and of course these rumours have been floating around practically since time began in the Super Smash Bros. World, that perhaps Mr. Sakurai, who has also worked on some other Nintendo series in the past, would, shall we say, give preferential favour and favourable treatment to his own characters.
So this is, in other words, Mr. Sakurai sitting at his desk wherever he sits when he's doing this sort of thing, bashing away at keys and things that they do programming, and thinking, oh, I'll tweak that here for this character because I like that one. I'll tweak this one over here, and oh yes, they're powerful because they're my favourites. Or, to be more specific, more exact, these are characters he's actually worked on in the past rather than just favourites.
That's right, and perhaps even characters that he had the overseeing role in, shall we say, in their games. Now, just as a side note, fellows, if you're not already receiving my musings, you can do so by following me on Twitter, the username GameChat. Rather fun, that, you know, but...
don't forget follow Bertie as well, Bertie chap.
Oh, yes, well, we do post things from time to time, but back to the point at hand then, fellows.
It was rather random, wasn't it?
It was quite random. There we are, fellows. You can now see here that Mr. Sakurai himself has actually responded to some of these allegations. Now, you may say firstly, well, where did these rumours all start?
Yes.
Well, of course, you'll see, it seems, as we said there, that the internet, of course, being ever a source of rumours and speculation, has been levelling these allegations at Mr. Sakurai himself by saying such things as, well, perhaps he wants to give preferential favour to Kid Icarus characters or to Kirby characters, because after all, he was the creator of those games, or had a large hand in those games.
Yeah.
And of course, he's the main chap who works on Super Smash Bros., so it's only natural that speculation would be drawn. But Mr. Sakurai has responded in the Japanese gaming publication Famitsu, and he has vehemently denied this,
Well, it would seem so, but before we look at that, why don't we just go back and look at Brawl, for example?
Oh, right,
and
yes.
see just how the characters in Brawl had got on.
That's
Now,
an
as we
interesting point, yes.
Well, indeed. Now, you see, Mr. Sakurai had been involved with Kirby, as we know, King DDD and Meta Knight within Brawl. So why don't we see how they were performing from the old tier lists in Brawl, shall we?
Well, just the name Meta Knight, I'm sure fans of the Brawl game will know
they should
exactly what that means, because Meta Knight was the undisputed king of Super Smash Bros. Brawl throughout its history, being at the #1 spot. Now, that in itself is, of course, saying something, and maybe the origin of these rumours. Meanwhile, in at number 9 was King DDD, quite high tier there, and of course I believe Kirby was placed at number 18 along the middle road. So we can see here that the 3 Kirby characters enjoyed quite favourable placings on the whole. Also, Pit was placed in at number 13, who is of course another of Sakurai's characters. So
Right.
overall, his chaps there are quite high up on the roster, I have to say.
Well, they are.
Especially with Meta Knight leading the pack.
Right, so let's have a look. So how many were in that entire roster in Brawl?
Well, we had
How many
King
did we have?
DDD, we had Kirby, Meta Knight, and Pit, the ones I've quoted there. A total roster there of 37 characters, and his
Right.
4 very close to the top there, I think.
Right, so we've got 37 characters there in Brawl, and we've got at number 1, Meta Knight, at number, I think it was what did you say, number 13 or something for one of the others, all in the top 20. in other
That's
words.
right, of course.
So
Now,
it's a bit suspicious. So is there some substantiation for what they said then, considering?
indeed, and I do think that is perhaps the point of origin of these rumours. Now, however, if we go and take a look at the current tier list for Super Smash Bros. 4 on Wii U, we can see the situation is quite different. In the Super Smash Bros. For Wii U tier list, we
Yes.
actually see that the first one of, let's see, Mr. Sakurai's characters, I'm just going down through the list now, it seems to be that can't be right. Hold on, Pit at number 30 and Dark Pit at number 28.
Pit at, right down there, Dark Pit and Pit at 28 and 30 out of how many?
This is quite a severe drop there in the standings of those characters. It seems to me as if there are a total of 49 and soon to be 50 characters in the roster here, but Mr. Sakurai's characters are very much middle of the road and below in this game.
Right, what about Palutena then?
Well, of course, Palutena, the one of our favourites, is in fact at number 43.
Oh my word! So, now if there is any truth in this, surely, he must have made a mistake.
Well, indeed, video. So, of course, you can see where the rumour might have arisen there with the Super Smash Bros. Brawl tier standings, although in this game I really don't think it's as reflected quite as much. Now, the question is, what did Mr. Sakurai himself have to say about this matter?
Well, he responded by saying, what merit is there for me to play favourites with characters I worked on?
Right.
Now that's an interesting statement because I suppose, well, if he likes them, it would be some merit because he could see them winning all over the world, couldn't he? For example?
Well, he said, what reason would I have to give these characters the better standings in the tier list?
Feel good.
I mean, I know what he's trying to say, but I don't really think that particular line is too convincing, old chap. But
well, there we are.
What did he say? What did he go on to say, old chap?
Well, then he said, I'm going to give you an example. He said that two characters that he personally has a lot of trouble with and can't use well are Pit and Palutena.
Ah.
And because of that, he feels that they're weaker than the average character, which is an interesting point, actually. Just because you can't use a character doesn't mean to say they're necessarily weak. Next chap might be able to use it very well.
Well, yes. So here we see Mr. Sakurai actually expressing his opinions on the standings of each character in the game. You notice, of course, he did not use the word tier list here. He actually says he felt that they were weaker than the average character. So he's avoiding the concept of tiers entirely. He went on to say, though, that he could adjust those characters to fit his own playstyle, and they might become even stronger, but as you may notice, he said, I haven't.
Now that's interesting because he said he can adjust them. He is able to adjust them
of course.
If he wants to. I suppose he can do it. He's created the game.
He's the Smash Brothers chief, so if he likes, he can change any of their characters and make Palutena superpowered and, Rosalina useless, for example, overnight. But he hasn't done that. He hasn't made his own characters superpowered or by any means superior in this game, and I do say in this game, because of course in the last game his characters were at the top of the roster in the form of Meta Knight. But this time round, though, it seems Meta Knight is quite useless on the tier list, and of course his Kid Icarus series, Pit and Palutena, and also Dark Pit are not all that special either.
Most certainly not. So it would seem that there is possibly some evidence or some grounding for these accusations in Brawl.
Yes.
But perhaps not so much in Super Smash Bros. Wii U version.
Right.
Although
now,
having said that, what we must think about here really is because, well, not necessarily Mr. Sakurai's favourites, but how do we know there's not someone in there that just thinks, I like that character, so I'll tweak it, and favouritism going on within? We don't know, do we?
I'm sure that kind of thing does go on, old chap. Indeed, certainly in the past Nintendo games, there have been undeniable cases of certain characters just being better than other characters, like, for example, Funky Kong and Daisy in Mario Kart Wii, Meta Knight in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, etc. and so forth, and I'm sure some people in the dev teams may have their own favourites and perhaps work to promote those characters in the game, but in this case, we are seeing that it seems Mr. Sakurai has taken a backseat very much here, and he is almost actively trying not to promote these characters in the game and not to give them too much power. However, there's something else we mustn't forget here.
Yes, what was that?
Well, of course, we know that in the Super Smash Bros. For Wii U game, there is a very large hidden Easter egg, which just so happens to be a huge hidden feature in the form of Palutena's guidance. Now, this is, of course, something that Mr. Sakurai himself worked on because it originates from her appearance in Kid Icarus Uprising on the Nintendo 3DS, complete with Viridi, Dark Pit, and various other characters from that game.
This is an extremely good point. So what we've done there, or what you've done there, just pointed something out worth thinking about, considering we're having this discussion.
Yes.
And of course, what's happened there is that whole thing, as you say, Palutena's guidance. If you haven't seen that, you can type it in on our channel. We've done a video on it. But the thing is, that whole thing of guidance is actually one of Mr. Sakurai's characters, and it's rather large, isn't it, in the game?
It's rather large. And of course, this raises a certain question that perhaps, Mr. Sakurai may be including features in the game that he likes. And meanwhile, fans of series such as the Donkey Kong series have complained and said, well, where's the DK representation? Why isn't Dixie Kong or K. Rool in the game? Where's the stages, etc. and so forth? And generally, what's going on? And of course, we know Donkey Kong at the bottom of the tier list, although Diddy Kong was at the top for quite a while, I think, old chap.
Well, he was.
We see an interesting observation there all the same, in so much as these characters do seem to be given certain, shall we say, special favour. Also, we can't forget that glorious anime trailer featuring Palutena, Link, and Pit himself in a combat sort of battle situation, which was very well received by the fans, as well as Kirby's appearance in the Rosalina trailer.
More favourites.
We're seeing lots and lots of, shall we say, spotlight being given to Mr. Sakurai's characters here. But then, on the flip side, on the other side, you have to be fair. I mean, he did work on these games in the past. It's only natural that he's going to want to give them some kind of, visibility or spotlight in this game that he's making.
Well, yes, indeed. It depends. I mean, what do the chaps and chappets and people listening generally think about this?
Well, yes.
I mean, is it sort of... There's two places perhaps you could think about this. You could say, well, hang on, it's a bit off, isn't it? I mean, Mr. Sakurai just tweeting things and tweaking things, I mean, to where he wants it. This is
Well-
a bit just not, it's not on at all. Or on the other hand, you could look and say, well, the thing is, it is his game, so if he wants to tweak characters, he can. Does it really matter?
Yes, and you have to say, if it wasn't for Mr. Sakurai in the first place, arguably Super Smash Bros. Either wouldn't exist today, or it certainly wouldn't be in its current form today, so we do have to thank him for quite a lot of that. And of course, we know that Mr. Sakurai worked very, very hard on this latest game, including through his hand injury, etc. and so forth, so I think we have to give him a bit of a break there in some way. You have to cut him some slack for, perhaps giving some featured promotion or a spotlight to his characters, but on the other side, on the flip side there, we have to make sure that his characters are not being unfairly, shall we say, powered up in the game, which I don't think they are. It's not quite the same as Brawl, where we had a lot of play on Meta Knight. In this time round, we don't really see Sakurai's characters in a super-powered position. We see them sort of in an average or low placing on the tier list, and to be honest, I think that's something I can live with, old chap.
Well, yes, indeed. So we've got to hope that those responsible for, checking and looking after and tweaking whatever it is the fighter balance of the characters aren't going to be biased one way or the other.
Yes.
We've got to hope that they're just trying to balance them all the same.
That's right.
Which one, I don't know. I think perhaps that could be difficult if people, people just tend to have favourites within. You just can't help it.
They do. That's humans for you. And of course, in any fighting game, it's extremely hard, if not impossible, to achieve perfect balance. There's always going to be characters that are just better at some things than other characters. That's the way the world works, old chap.
Well, most certainly.
Well, it's quite an interesting point on the whole. What do you think, Vanils? There's our thoughts on the matter. I don't think I have too much of a problem with this, as long as it's not, too blatant, and also as long as Mr. Sakurai's characters are not given superpowers in the game.
Well, yes, indeed. No doubt there'll be more exciting sort of whatever it is Super Smash Bros. News coming out at E3 next week. We'll be covering that, so for goodness sake, come and have a look and see what's going on.
By George, fellows, indeed this hasn't even Game Chap and Bertie discussing Mr. Sakurai's bias allegations. Let us know what you think, guys. Thank you most kindly for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you once more on the next exciting hour, guys.
yes.
Until then...